Acheron's current teammate selection is a pretty interesting topic at the moment. Every other DPS character in the game can make use of the best supports and teammates we have currently with little to no drawback. This means that even slightly underwhelming characters damage-wise can be carried by their support selection, which usually means that the best characters in the game make full use of the best resources available. Acheron is a little different. Her Nihility trace basically forces her to run 2 Nihility characters at E0, punishing her quite heavily for not running specific Nihility teammates. Due to this, there has been quite a lot of discourse over what teams are best for her, as there are quite a few requirements to be a good teammate for Acheron. Damage amplification, debuff application and utility are the 3 main things I think are the most important when deciding who works best for Acheron. Some of her teammates excel in one of these categories, whilst others are more all-rounders. There is also a leaked character people don't know much about who seems like the perfect Acheron teammate, but I'll talk about them later. In this video I'll be going over every single Acheron teammate in depth and scoring them based on how well I think they work with Acheron. This will mostly be talking about E0, but I'll mention some stuff about E2 as well. I will also talk about some of my favorite Acheron team comps near the end of the video, and I think you'll be surprised at what I think is her best comp at E0. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. The first character I'll be going over is Pela. Pela is Acheron's best teammate at the moment, being a great all-rounder requiring low investment for high returns. Her damage amplification is pretty solid, with her giving up to 58% defense shred, and her debuff application is extremely potent with her ultimate, skill and basic attack with the resolution light cone all contributing to Acheron's stacking mechanic. She is super easy to build and doesn't really require any investment outside of some effect hit rate and speed. Most current Acheron teams, if not all, will feature Pela and 1 or 2 more support characters, as she's just that good with Acheron. The second character I want to look at is Silverwolf. Usually paired with Pela, Silverwolf is a solid option for Acheron, as she essentially does the same thing as Pela but with stronger single target debuffs in return for losing out on some AoE value. Silverwolf does not actually need to hold the resolution light cone, as all her abilities, including her basic attack, apply a debuff, which means she can hold a light cone like tutorial or her signature to either use her ultimate more frequently or further increase her damage amplification. As strong as her single target debuffs are, I would generally recommend her less than Pela for Acheron, as she is an AoE damage dealer first, so losing out on the AoE defense shred is pretty huge for her. Guinaifen, similarly to Pela, is another 4-star Nihility option for Acheron. However, she is the first character where I'd say she isn't actively that great with Acheron. This is mostly due to her Fire Kiss mechanic, increasing the amount of damage enemies take once they receive damage from a burn. The main issue here is that Fire Kiss takes a very long time to stack up, and by the time you do, the enemy will either be dead or close to dying. It also doesn't count as an additional debuff, so it doesn't give her an advantage in debuff application either. However, in longer fights where you can stack up Fire Kiss, Guinaifen is a pretty okay option. She is extremely accessible, as she is currently free in an event and her eidolons aren't particularly required to make her work. She can also contribute some personal damage if you decide to build her as such, and she can open up the prisoner set for Acheron. If there are no other options around, then Guinaifen works fine as an Acheron support. Finally, WELT. Debatably Acheron's best sustain option, WELT can essentially allow you to cheat the Nihility trace and let you run a Harmony character at E0, as he can fill the role of a sustain in Acheron teams in replacement of an actual preservation or abundance character. With his imprisonment and action delay on enemies, you can surprisingly get through pretty hard content by using WELT efficiently as a sustain. He can interrupt enemies by timing his ultimate, and you can essentially just kill them before they attack you. With the tutorial light cone to get his ultimate up consistently and some effect hit rate to make his skills slow even better, WELT can enable you to run 3 offensive teams or even throw in Ruan Mei to further improve the team's survivability whilst also buffing WELT's and Acheron's damage. There is a pretty great guide on this I saw on YouTube going completely in depth on their synergy, which I'll link in the description. But generally, if you want to see the ceiling of Acheron's damage at E0, WELT sustain is definitely the way to go. Finally, Jiaoqiu. If that name is unfamiliar to you, It's mostly because it's a character whose kit leaked ages ago and most people didn't take notice. They work similarly to Pela, applying AoE Def Shred on their basic and skill, increasing ultimate damage and healing enemies based off their attack stat. They also apply debuffs inside and outside their turn, meaning that they can stack Acheron's ultimate faster than any current Nihility character we have so far. This is because of how Acheron's ultimate mechanic works. Every action a debuff is applied in counts as one stack. This means that if damage is spread out to 3 different actions, then it can generate 3 separate stacks. Jiaoqiu does exactly this, which makes me believe that Jiaoqiu is a shameless dedicated support for Acheron, like Sparkle to Dan Heng or Kafka to Black Swan. Jiaoqiu, as long as they remain like this, will most definitely end up being Acheron's best teammate in the future. And with the healing in her kit, she may be able to fill in a similar role to WELT, being able to cheat the Nihility trace and similarly enabling the use of Harmony characters at E0. But we don't have that much on them at the moment, so it's hard to cast full judgment. Speaking about her sustain options, Acheron has quite a lot. She can make good use of Fuzan, as she can hold the Trend Light Cone for extra debuff stacking, and since Acheron has such low base defense and HP, Fuzan's ultimate sustain synergizes really well with her, easily being the most comfortable option. However, you could actually make an argument for Jeopard being slightly better at this role than Fuzan. With his skill freezing the enemy and his early Eidolons not only giving him a higher base chance on the freeze and slowing enemies after they become unfrozen, one Jeopard skill can apply up to 2 debuffs on an enemy. However, the enemy being frozen does mean they aren't constantly stacking debuffs with the Trend Light Cone, so I guess it balances out. Gallagher is also a decent sustain option for Acheron, applying debuffs on his ultimate and enhanced basic attack. He basically just does the bare minimum required to be a viable choice for Acheron. Finally, Fire TB. I can bet you that nobody expected the Fire Trailblazer comeback in 2024, but it's happening. Her taunt skill applies a debuff, and with the Trend Light Cone once again, she can guarantee enemies to hit her, leading to a whole bunch of stacks for free. Fire TB is generally the best option for AoE content like Pure Fiction, as she is really low investment and lets Acheron use her ultimate so fast that she can potentially end up being one of the better PF characters in the game. Generally, Acheron has a few notable team cores. Pela, a second Nihility and a sustain, is going to be the go-to for most people. It's the most flexible and consistent team core at E0, as you can really just pick and choose who you like. The best variation of this in my opinion is Silverwolf, Pela and Fuzan, as it's the best all-rounder team for her. It's a great mix of single target and AoE damage and is really easy to play as well. Guinaifen can be swapped out in place of Silverwolf here, as she, like I mentioned before, is much more accessible than Silverwolf. The second team core Acheron has is Pela and WELT with a Harmony character, usually being either Sparkle or Bronya for offense or Ruan Mei for defense. This is Acheron's highest damage ceiling team at E0, as you not only have 3 characters buffing Acheron's damage, you also have things such as WELT's personal damage further contributing to the team's overall damage. The variation for this at E2 is that you don't have to run WELT or Pela, and instead can either run a second Harmony in replace of Pela or an actual sustain in place of WELT. This will generally be the team comp I'll be leaning towards the most, as I like big numbers a lot, and I think the challenge of trying to keep the team alive with WELT sounds pretty fun to me. The final core is Acheron in dot teams, usually in place of Kafka or Ruan Mei. If this sounds cope to you, it's because it kind of is. Dot teams don't generate that many debuffs for Acheron, but have Black Swan and sometimes Ruan Mei to increase her damage, and a ton of personal contribution from Black Swan herself. This team sounds pretty fun to play, but it's definitely far from being her best option, as you are pretty much handicapping Black Swan's and Acheron's damage at the exact same time. Overall, Acheron does have quite a few different cores and standout teammates she can use, with a ton of flexibility in terms of what teams she can be ran in. I personally think Acheron's future scaling looks extremely promising, with more Nihility characters like Jiaoqiu on the horizon, and I expect her to only get stronger as time goes on. But anyways, that's enough yapping from me. I think you get the point now. Pretend I asked you to subscribe in a really creative way that I'm too lazy to think of, and I'll see you in the next video.